bless you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Be seated, please. We welcome you today to the Christians United for Israel 13th Annual National Summit. This year we celebrate Israel and her 70 years of miracles. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is a God of miracles. Israel is a nation that has been made possible by miracles. In the genesis of time, God delivered the Jewish people from 400 years of slavery. Their sons were being drowned in the Nile River. Their backs were being beaten by slave drivers. God sent them a deliverer in the person of Moses through the burning bush. God sent to Egypt 10 plagues that crushed the Egyptian economy. The miracle of dividing the Red Sea following the drowning of Pharaoh's army, followed by the miracle of the cloud by day and the fire by night, followed by the miracle of manna that fell every morning. The history of Israel is an unending parade of supernatural miracles. Fast forward to the miracle of May 14th, 1948, when the nation of Israel was reborn. The prophet Isaiah writes, "A nation shall be born in a day," and that nation was the nation of Israel. The day after Prime Minister Ben-Gurion read Israel's declaration of statehood, 5 Arab armies led by British and Nazi officers attacked the Jewish state in an attempt to kill the Jewish state in the birth canal. The Bible says, "He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps." Say that with me. He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Bible records, "He that touches you," speaking of the Jewish people and the state of Israel, has touched the apple of God's eye. Apple translates pupil. If you really want to tick somebody off, stick them in the middle of the eye. God says when you are attacking the Jewish people, you are putting your finger in the middle of my eye. You have my attention in a very negative way. By a miracle from heaven, Israel won that war, and the exiles came home from their Gentile graves from around the world to the promised land after almost 2,000 years of wandering the face of the earth. The War of 1967 was a major miracle. The Six-Day War was a time of terror in Israel. Americans hear Six-Day War and they celebrate a great victory. But leading up to the Six-Day War, people believed that it was literally going to be a second Holocaust that was about to happen. Jews were digging mass graves in Israel, anticipating the deaths of thousands of Jewish people. Jewish people were leaving Israel by the thousands. And then the God of miracles stepped up. At the last moment, General Moshe Dayan was appointed the head of the IDF. He was a bold and brilliant commander who made the decision to preemptively strike Egypt, whose air force was completely supplied by Russia. At 7:10 a.m. on June the 5th, Israeli jets attacked the Egyptian Air Force at every airfield in the nation of Israel. In 4 hours, 2/3 of the Egyptian Air Force was totally destroyed. The Russians were in shock, as were the world. The results of the war was not a second Holocaust. The result was that Israel doubled the amount of land they owned. They gained total access to Jerusalem and the Western Wall for the first time since the Roman Empire had invaded them. They captured the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, which is the birthplace of many Bible prophets. It should be noted that America at that point in time did not come to Israel's aid. Lyndon Johnson did not want to offend the Russians who had so heavily armed the Jewish people. But there was a spy in the sky who was watching over Israel. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that gave the Jewish people a blood covenant to own that land was watching. David says in chapter 2, "He that sits in the heavens was laughing. By his mighty right hand he scattered the enemies of Israel like the shucks of the summer threshing floor. He brought victory to the Zion estate. Desperation became jubilation. Certain death became deliverance. Terror was transformed into triumph. He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Let God arise and let his enemies be scattered." The parade of miracles had a dazzling starburst effect in the glorious wonder of 2017. President Donald J. Trump announced to the world that Jerusalem was to be recognized as the capital of Israel. Many other presidents had promised that, but none of them had produced that. Mr. President, the 4.3 million members of Christians United for Israel, thank you for your bold and courageous decision. Give a shout. Mr. President, you have stepped into political immortality by blessing the state of Israel and the Jewish people. The evangelicals of America will always honor your memory because you had the courage to do what 5 other presidents would not do. You have put your fingerprints on the history of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. I want every person in this room to capture this thought, that in just a few years, every major city on the face of the earth will be totally insignificant, because from this point forward, in the providence of God, Jerusalem is going to be the epicenter of the world. Everything is going to evolve around Jerusalem. The Bible says that Jerusalem is the city of God. Jerusalem is the shoreline of eternity, because it is today, tomorrow, and forever going to exist. Jerusalem is where Abraham placed his son Isaac on the altar to prove his devotion to a God he had never seen. Jerusalem is the city where King David conquered from the Jebusites 3,000 years ago, making it the eternal capital of the city of Israel. You would think that the United Nations could get that by this time. God's command to all believers is to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love you. I assure you that is a Bible fact. The prophet Isaiah said, "For Zion's sake, I will not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest. You who make mention of the name of the Lord," that would be CUFI, "give him no rest until he makes Jerusalem the praise of all of the earth." Jerusalem is where the eternal kingdom of the living God is going to be established. Jerusalem is where Messiah is going to sit on the throne of his father David and rule in a kingdom that shall never end. The parade of miracles continued when the president announced that the U.S. Embassy would be moved to Jerusalem. His advisor said, "Don't do it." He was under intense pressure. He was receiving calls from heads of state all over the world saying, "Don't do it. It will start a war that will never end." President Donald J. Trump made a promise through the campaign that he would do it, and he kept that promise. Thank you, Mr. President, for keeping your promise again. The parade of miracles continued when President Trump removed the United States from the Iran nuclear deal. It was bold and it was brilliant. Barack Obama had given $150 billion to Iran, money that was used to advance terrorism, money that was used to build a nuclear weapon that was to be an existential threat to Israel. Make no mistake about it, that $150 billion was building a nuclear cloud over the state of Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu encouraged our president to nix it or fix it. Donald J. Trump, with courage and boldness, he nixed it. Thank you once again, Mr. President. Our president's bold and courageous decision then is making the world a safer place. Every room, every person in this room is a part of that living miracle. The parade of miracles was on display the day in February 2006 when 400 leading evangelicals gathered at Cornerstone Church in San Antonio to form Christians United for Israel. Today, by the grace of God, today, by the mighty hand of God, today, because of the favor of God, Christians United for Israel has more than 4.3 million members. We are the largest pro-Israel organization in America, if not the world. This is a question the press often asks. Why is this? The answer is very simple. God is with us. God is with us. God is with us. Give the Lord praise in the house. We are Christians United for Israel. Christians are people who read and obey the Word of God as the moral compass for their lives. Listen very closely. If you do not obey the Bible, you are not a Christian. You may be going to church singing Amazing Grace, but you're not a Christian until you obey what's in the book. A little less enthusiasm on that applause. Let me say it another way. You do not break God's laws. God's laws will break you. If you've noticed, the further America has gotten away from the Word of God, the more secular we have become. And secularism is a religion. It is a substitute for God. It worships the God of self. It could care less about Israel or Jerusalem or anything else. That's why there must be a return to the reading and obedience of the Torah and the Word of God. It is the moral compass for the soul. It is not a recommendation. It is the law of God. Which brings me back to the word Christian, because you often hear the phrase Christian anti-Semitism. There is no such thing as Christian anti-Semitism. Christianity is driven by the law of God, by the law of love. That's the law of God. Anti-Semitism is driven by hatred. The Bible says sweet and bitter water does not flow from the same fountain. So stop using the word Christian anti-Semitism. Call them pagans, call them secularists, call them anything. They're not Christians. It is not possible to say, I am a Christian and not love the Jewish people. Jesus said, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. The my brethren in that phrase refers to the Jewish people. I assure you it does not refer to Gentiles. Remember, Judaism does not need Christianity to explain its existence, but Christianity cannot explain its existence without Judaism. According to St. Paul's writings in the book of Romans chapter 11, our roots are Jewish roots. We are spiritual brothers with the Jewish people committed to the Torah. Christians United for Israel is at war with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's everybody's problem. Anti-Semitism, by the way, is sin. And in the Bible, sin damns the soul. That's a refreshing thought for secular humanism. Just for the record, the Bible says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. That's still the law of God. Why has CUFI prospered? Because we are Christians united. Say the word united. United. Unity is a Bible theme with major proportions. King David writes, where there is unity, there the Lord will command the blessing. When Christians get unified for a particular cause that's in harmony with the word and the will of God, God will open the windows of heaven and bless you with blessings that cannot be contained. God commanded the blessing on the centurion in Luke 7 for building a synagogue for the Jewish people and healed his servant. He commanded a blessing on Cornelius in Acts chapter 10 because he was, quote, of good report among the Jewish people. Is your church of good report among the Jewish people? If it's not, it needs to be, because there is where God will pour out the blessing. He commanded a blessing on America, and God has blessed our nation for the manner in which we have been a home for the Jewish people until the state of Israel could be established. George Washington wanted to honor the Jewish people, and if you look at the $1 bill over the head of the eagle, you will see a six-pointed star. That's the Star of David. Around that star, you will see a star burst that represents the Shekinah glory that was over the tabernacle. George Washington was quite a Bible scholar. Turn it upside down, and it is a symbol of the Jewish menorah. We have honored the Jewish people, and God has blessed us. The unity of CUFI allows us to take action on behalf of Israel at a moment's time. Why did we have the power in recent days to flood the offices of a certain U.S. senator who was trying to stop America's aid to Israel? We put 80,000 emails in his office in a very few days. That bill failed, 19 votes against and 1 for, because of 80,000 members of CUFI stood up and said no. Why has the impossible become reality? Because we have become united. Your presence here this morning speaks that we are united. And because of that unity, the God of Israel is with us. What we are doing is pleasing in the sight of God. Prophetically, King David says, "This is the set time. This is the established time to bless Israel and the Jewish people. This is not a time to rest on our laurels. This is a time to go forward with full throttle. This is the set time for Zion to be blessed by Christians all over the world." Think about it. Never in our history have we had favor at the same time with the President of the United States, with the Prime Minister of Israel, with the Secretary of State, with the ambassador to Israel, for the ambassador from Israel. All of those people are suddenly helping us achieve our objectives because the favor of God is with this organization. I have had people say, "Why don't you have a more compromising spirit?" Let me tell you something. There is no compromise with anti-Semitism. Compromise, in my mind, is defeat on the installment plan. In the words of Winston Churchill, in closing, you ask what is our aim? I can tell you in a word. Our aim is victory. No matter how long the struggle, no matter the cost, victory is our aim, because without victory, there is no survival. May God bless each and every one of you for every effort that you extend toward blessing the Jewish people and the state of Israel. I assure you that God is watching and recording every righteous act, and in the day of our judgment, He will reward you for what you are doing. Let us renew our finest efforts. Let us be courageous in this fight. Let us not be afraid of those who oppose us. Let us recognize that God is with us. Therefore, nothing is impossible to us. I believe the best is yet to be. May the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the creator of heaven and earth, bless you one and all. May He bless America, and may He bless the state of Israel. Amen. Thank you. I've just been told the Prime Minister of Israel is ready. Be seated. We'll receive him by video. Just a second. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was born in 1949 in Tel Aviv and grew up in Jerusalem. In 1993, Mr. Netanyahu was elected Likud Party chairman and served as leader of the opposition until being elected Prime Minister of Israel in 1996. In 2009, Mr. Netanyahu was elected Prime Minister for the second time. The Prime Minister has been a close friend of CUFI and endeavored to strengthen the relationship between Israel and America's Christian community. I have known the Prime Minister personally since 1985. He has spoken in our church. He has been in my home. He is a man of integrity. He's a man of courage. Israel could not have a more brilliant leader for such time as this. Will you welcome, please, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Shalom. 24680. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Hagee. Thank you, CUFI, for supporting Israel. We appreciate your support, and we thank you for it. We appreciate the support of Christians around the world. Jews, Christians, so many others can agree on one thing. Israel is a miracle, a state in the heart of the Middle East that has known democracy, pure democracy and liberty every day of its 70-year history. A pluralistic, open society, a democracy where diversity is celebrated, not feared. Christians also know another fundamental truth. Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years. Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for 70 years, and Jerusalem will always be our capital. Thank you, President Trump, and thank our many, many Christian friends around the world for recognizing this basic truth. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel is also the only country for thousands of miles where Christians not only survive, they thrive. Christian holy sites are protected, and Christian worship is done without fear. Christians have achieved incredible heights in Israel. We have an Arab Christian who served on our Supreme Court for 15 years. We have others, diplomats, business people, university professors, doctors, everything. They're in every field. Many, many examples of Christians who contribute greatly to Israeli society and share in the great miracle of Israel's success. Sadly, some countries don't respect Christians. In Iran, Christians are brutally persecuted. Christian pastors have spent years in prison there. Now, this is an issue which I believe should concern everyone. And let me say clearly, Israel stands in complete solidarity with persecuted Christians in Iran. And I ask, why are so many people silent as Christians are jailed and tortured in Iran? Well, I can say this, we in Israel will not be silent. And I will continue to raise the plight of the long-suffering Iranian people, Christians, Baha'is, students, journalists. Iran's regime is a point of darkness in the Middle East. Israel is a point of light. The great news is that Israel has never been stronger. Nations from around the world are flocking to Israel. They seek our ingenuity. They seek our technology. They seek our intelligence in both senses of the word. Israel still faces many threats. On our southern border, the fanatic terrorist group Hamas calls for genocide of Jews. In the north, Hezbollah has stockpiled massive numbers of missiles aimed at Israel. And Iran, well, Iran openly calls for Israel's annihilation. But Israel is strong. We will not let thugs and tyrants bully us. We will always defend ourselves. We will prosper. We will thrive. And Israel's strength is not merely because of our army, it's because of our spirit. And it's because of the spirit of friends like you around the world. Thank you for always standing with Israel. You're truly among our greatest friends in the world. I cherish that friendship, and I cherish your solidarity. Thank you for standing with Israel. Thank you for standing with the truth. Thank you all.
I want to introduce to you a man who has a special place in our hearts. Stuart Force is the father of Taylor Force, the young American who tragically lost his life in Tel Aviv when a Palestinian terrorist went on a stabbing rampage in March 2016. As all of you know, the terrorist family then received a pension from the Palestinian government as a reward for this evil act. At the time, the United States was providing hundreds of millions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority in foreign aid, and our tax dollars were being used to reward terrorists who stabbed and killed Jews. At the end of 2016, Christians United for Israel decided to make the Taylor Force Act our top legislative priority. Our members sent over 1 million emails to Congress in support of legislation that would close the loophole that allowed American foreign aid to fund Palestinian terrorism. We did it so the Stuart Force and his family and other families would not be victims. You did that. You did that. You did that. The unity. You did that. He kept the image and memory of Taylor Force at the forefront of our minds. And we kept his name and memory at the top of the agenda for Congress until finally the Taylor Force Act was passed and signed into law in March of this year. We're honored to have Taylor's father here with us today to speak about his son and to show his family our love and our solidarity. Please join me in standing and giving a warm welcome to Stuart Force as we remember the life and legacy of his son that will serve to make thousands of innocent people safer in decades to come. I present to you Stuart Force.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. My beautiful wife of 35 years, Robbie, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. To be on the same program as Pastor Hagee, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and representatives of the Israeli Defense Forces is very humbling, to say the least. Our first goal today is to thank the leadership, the staff, and most importantly you, the members and friends of CUFI, for your early, strong, and obviously effective support of the Taylor Force Act. Your emails, phone calls, personal contacts with legislators and members of the administration were an essential part of the successful process of making it law. It stops the flow of generous U.S. foreign assistance to the Palestinian people through the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority diverts that money to pay for terrorism and to enrich the pockets of the leaders of the Palestinian Authority. Perhaps now those terrorist acts will end and Israelis, Americans, and other visitors to the great state of Israel can go in peace. We would also like to thank Mr. Sander Gerber, Senator Lindsey Graham, Congressman Doug Lamborn. Sander was the catalyst behind the act, providing the research detailing the inhuman Palestinian laws and guiding us in our meetings with congressional leaders. Senator Graham and Congressman Lamborn were the lead sponsors of the legislation, educating and urging their colleagues to support the act. And their legislative assistants, many of whom are here this morning, took the enactment of the act as a personal goal, dedicating long hours and making personal effort to make sure it became law. To all, please accept our deepest gratitude for your compassion, hard work, and friendship. Thank you. I must mention one part of the Taylor Force Act that's often overlooked. When you start talking about financial aid, you forget the whole motive behind this legislation, and I'm going to paraphrase. The Palestinian Authority must revoke any law or decree that implements compensation for terrorist actions, and they must publicly condemn such acts of violence and take steps to bring such perpetrators to justice. It's not just the money, it's the whole frame of mind and their whole thinking behind the funding of terrorism. We will be monitoring this requirement very closely in the coming months and years. As Pastor Hagee said, on March 23rd of 2018, the Taylor Force Act became the law of the land. And on July 2nd, I was in Israel as an invited guest to witness the debate and vote in the Knesset on legislation paralleling the Taylor Force Act. They displayed overwhelming bipartisanship in passing the act. The same day, Prime Minister of Australia announced that their government policy going forth would be to stop financial aid to the Palestinian Authority that was being diverted, and instead would go through other agencies to go directly to the Palestinian people who sorely need their help. And just recently, I've been contacted by people in Canada and the United Kingdom. They're curious about the act and the possibility of implementing the same measures in their country. See what you've started? From the Force family, and on behalf of the innocent lives that will be spared, and the hundreds of families that will not be torn apart when the Taylor Force Act is fully implemented, thank you. Our second goal today is to share a little bit of Taylor with you. I have to make a personal confession. I'm pretty emotional, and I always have been. My sisters will tell you that as a young boy, I would cry watching Shirley Temple movies. And the movie Old Yeller, forget about it. Forget about it. So please bear with me if I hesitate a little bit. At every stage in his life, Taylor was influenced by wonderful people. His friends, his teachers, his Boy Scout leaders, his West Point and active duty Army commanders and comrades, his professors and classmates at Vanderbilt University. They all contributed to making him a good person. When word of his tragic and unnecessarily passing got out, when the word spread, his friends, acquaintances, and others whose lives were so positively touched by Taylor found out. They went to his Facebook page and left posts. One post from a good friend, Barrett, actually all of Taylor's friends were good friends. The post by Barrett still stands out. Barrett said, "Taylor practiced intentional fellowship." How true. He could always sense when someone was having a hard time, or just needed a friend or a helping hand. Taylor never waited to ask, to be asked. He offered. In fact, sometimes he insisted. It was clear from an early age that Taylor's priorities would enable him to grow up to be an outstanding young man. He gave a talk. He attended camp as a youngster at Camp Stewart. It's a boys' camp about 80 miles to the west of San Antonio. And they encouraged the development of the young campers, not only through athletic skills and their swimming ability and their crafts, but the motto of the camp, as you drove in through the entrance, there was a banner. So each time you drove in, you saw the banner. It said, "Don't wait to be a man to be great, be a great boy." Taylor took that to heart, and he was focused. Years later, after he graduated from West Point, was commissioned second lieutenant in the Army, got his BS degree, and started training with his unit at Fort Hood. He found out that in the fall of 2010, they'd be making their first combat deployment to Iraq. That summer, he was invited back to Camp Stewart to give a motivational talk to the campers at a Sunday morning chapel service. As I was going through Taylor's personal items, I found a draft copy of the talk that he gave. In it, he talked about qualities of leadership, setting goals, defining your goals, and working towards them. And he finished his talk to the young campers and the staff, urging them to set priorities in their life. And Taylor finished his talk by saying, I'll share my priorities with you. My priorities are God first, everyone else second, myself last." And that's the way he lived his life. When Robbie and I first came to DC in September of 2016, to say a few remarks at the press conference introducing the Taylor Force Act, we had the opportunity to meet face-to-face with Senator Graham for the first time. He ushered us into his office and he explained the legislative process to us and what to expect at the press conference. Then he lowered his voice and looked at Robbie and I and said, "Stuart, Robbie, how are you doing?" We said, "Senator Graham, we feel that Taylor is still on deployment and he'll be coming home any day." He looked at us and said, "Taylor is home. It's you who are on deployment, and you will be going home soon." that put our lives in perspective very quickly. Robbie, our wonderful daughter Kristen, and I are dedicating the remainder of our deployment to being a force for good, just like Taylor was his entire life. With our faith and the continued love and encouragement of good people like you, our deployment will be successful. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. Since we're switching to the IDF portion of the morning, we're going to learn a little Hebrew. So when I say Boker Tov, you say Boker Or. Boker Tov. Boker Or. All right. You, each and every one of you this morning, are truly an answer to prayer. When the lights go out on Summit Tuesday evening, our team gets to work on the summit for the following year. We pray, we work hard, we pray some more, and until the doors open on Monday morning and you all flood in, we don't start breathing. So now we can breathe, that you're seated, and we want to profoundly thank you for taking the time and making the financial sacrifice to come and be with us in Washington. Thank you. As a small token of our appreciation to you, you'll find 4 books on your seats. 1 is for you, and 3 are for your neighbors and friends. Each one of you here represents thousands in your churches, in your spheres of influence. So what you learn in this hall, what you learn on the Hill tomorrow, don't just keep it in your heart, in your head. Share it with your neighbors, friends, social, both tangibly and also in everyone you encounter. So we're going to make a big impact in Washington this week. You being here tells us the place that Israel holds in your soul. Us being here together will make an imprint on the U.S.-Israel relationship. Numbers speak in this town. And what people will be talking about tomorrow night, the press and members of Congress, is that CUFI assembled the largest ever CUFI summit to come to Washington and speak in one voice on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people. So thank you. Images talk in the battle for public opinion. One negative image on the front page of a major newspaper can, in a blink of an eye, transform people's opinion on Israel. And this is where our army, you, the 4.3 million CUFI members and over 2 million social media followers, really come into action. When the IDF is under attack, when Israel's under attack, the IDF laces up their boots, they kiss their wives, husbands, daughters, and sons goodbye. We pray for their safety. We ourselves are not lacing up our boots, But what we need to do is to jump into the fight in the public opinion arena. And our relationship with the IDF enables us to do that efficiently and effectively. When the mainstream media is not reporting the true facts on the ground, the CUFI leadership has a direct line to the leadership at the IDF. We're then able to share with you in real time photos and videos that you're not seeing. It's not that the IDF isn't putting them out. It's just not the story that the press wants to tell. And so thank God we have assembled an army. You may be able to ignore a voice or two here or there. You cannot ignore 4.3 million voices all articulating the same message. So thank you. So this is our role on the battlefield. I'm about to introduce you to some brave men and women whose role is on Israel's actual battlefield. They're being represented here this morning by Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Weiss. Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Weiss has served in the IDF since 2002. She's defended her country during the Second Lebanon War and Operation Protective Edge. During her 16 years of service in the Artillery Corps, Lieutenant Colonel Weiss, I just promoted her, Lieutenant Colonel Weiss has served as a battery commander in the Rocket Launcher Battalion, a UAV commander in a combat unit, and a commander of the Tactical UAV unit. Born and raised in Israel, she is a devoted wife and a mother of 2 young children. She also holds degrees in political science and Jewish history from Hebrew University. Join me in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Weiss to the CUFI stage.
Thank you. Honored guests, this year we are celebrating Israel's 17th anniversary. We even find ourselves surprised that only 7 decades have passed since our nation's birth, mostly because throughout those decades we have built hundreds of cities and towns, endured 7 wars, and become a startup nation. Thank you. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Reut Rettig Weiss. I'm 34, married, and the mother of 2 beautiful girls. Throughout my entire military service, I served as a combat soldier, an officer in the Artillery Corps Field Array. I participated in countless operational activities, from the Golan to the border with Gaza. I participated in the Second Lebanon War and in Operation Protective Edge that took place in Gaza in 2014. These operations influenced me profoundly and encouraged me to continue in field-level command roles. During Operation Pillar of Defense, I was on maternity leave and was forced to run to bomb shelters together with my baby daughter. Currently, I'm the commander of the Skylark Unit, a combat unit which includes tactical teams that operate small, low-signature UAVs to aid maneuver efforts. The Skylark UAVs are the smallest fixed-wing drones in the IDF. This is a special unit which participates in all of the operational activities of the IDF. My unit performs routine operational activities along all Israel's borders. During wars, we will join infantry and armed forces in order to execute the mission in the best manner. The mission of defending the state of Israel. Yeah. The security situation in the state of Israel is challenged daily, but no matter the challenges that Israel faces, no matter the threats that we are confronted with, we will be ready in the air, on land, and at sea to defend Israel's borders. Along the northern border, the IDF continues to stand strong in the face of chaos in Syria. ISIS and Hezbollah forces are active on the Golan Heights and use the current situation in Syria as a perfect opportunity to become combat ready. Any of their threats against Israel will be answered with a firm, uncompromising hand. Syria is unstable, and time will tell which power will arise in the region. Along the Lebanese border, Hezbollah continues to strengthen its forces against Israel, and the IDF continues to conduct exercises in order to prepare to this threat. We estimate that if Israel is involved in war with Hezbollah, the whole country will be in rocket range. We expect to be attacked by thousands of rockets every day, most of them aimed at civilians, communities, industrial areas, vital infrastructure, such as gas and electricity. In addition, we believe that Hezbollah will try to infiltrate Israeli territory via ground operation in order to massacre Israeli civilians. In this kind of war, the IDF have to act extensively in order to negate the threat as quickly as possible. On the southern border, Hamas continues to starve the population of Gaza, holding it hostage. Instead of worrying about their own population, Hamas is busy day and night planning attacks against the state of Israel. Recently, Hamas incited the population to take part in violent riots along the border fence. These riots are violent. Armed terrorists stormed into Israel. Piles of tires were burnt. Fires were set in fields. Women and children were sent to throw rocks. They sent their children into harm's way. Let that sink in. Hamas quite cynically exploits the situation in the Gaza Strip primarily for the sake of propaganda. It will always be difficult for us to deal with pictures because pictures do not tell the entire story. The IDF does everything to keep the order within these chaotic riots and keep them away from Israeli communities. On the other side of the border, hundreds of Israelis are trying to live in peace, some only meters away from the fence. The IDF will not tolerate any intrusion into Israel territory, just as your army would not tolerate it. Agencies worked around the clock to find unique solutions to this threat, leading to the destruction of Hamas tunnels, which breached Israeli territory. Imagine if Hamas infiltrated through one of those tunnels into nearby Israeli community and attacked houses, shops, or God forbid, a kindergarten. This is the image of victory that Hamas seeks and what the IDF must work tirelessly to prevent. The situation in Judea and Samaria is unstable due to weak leadership and terrorists trying to destabilize the area. Most of the time, cooperation between the IDF and Palestinian civilians is successful in keeping the peace and employment opportunities for tens of thousands of Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria. In spite of that, we still experience what we commonly define as self-radicalized terrorism, a type of terror which is conducted by individuals who have become radicalized by social networks, in mosques and the ever-propaganding Hamas, Jihad, and ISIS media. This is characterized by lone wolf terrorist attacks that attempt to stab, commit ramming attacks, and shoot at the local Jewish population or IDF. In those types of events, the IDF acts as a shield between the terrorists and the civilian population. Unfortunately, occasionally civilians get injured, and when they do, it is brutal. For example, the murder of an entire family in Itamar community, or the murder of the Hankins in front of their children when they stopped their car to help disguised terrorists in the side of the road. In conclusion, I am proud to stand here today representing the IDF and the State of Israel. The most important reason why I am here is to raise awareness and understanding at the current situation in Israel for American audience. Israel is the only democratic country in the Middle East. Within this country, people want normal lives, lives without war, without sirens. Although we have yet to truly enter a period of peace and quiet, the citizens of Israel are proud to be here and serve the nation's military. A significant part of this is thanks to the legitimacy provided by our closest friend and ally, the United States of America. I would like to thank you all, members of CUFI, for the opportunity to present the situation in Israel before you today. Thank you for the incredible support you lend the State of Israel and the Jewish people. Thank you. May God bless Israel, and may God bless the United States of America. And now I would like to introduce to you my colleague, Lieutenant Lior, who will present to you our challenges in the southern border of Israel. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lior Lowy. I'm currently serving as an officer in the IDF. I was born and raised in Belgium, and I started my army service when I moved to Israel almost 4 years ago. I moved together with my twin brother, who also served as a commander in the IDF and recently finished his service. I'm extremely honored to be here today in order to share my story as a combat soldier and officer. I started my basic training in the Caracal unit, the first and biggest mixed combat unit in the IDF, which allows young men and women from all over the country to serve together, side by side, and defend our borders. After 8 months of intense basic training, I was picked by my commanders and sent out to a 4-month commanding course, at the end of which I became a squad commander of 12 young soldiers who just enlisted the army. My role was to lead them throughout the first months in the IDF and teach them the basics of their army knowledge and skills as future combat soldiers. My role as a squad commander was much more than just training them. It was also taking care of their well-being, making sure they were healthy and strong. I took an interest in their education as well as in their motivation, and I generally took over the role of their parents at the base. After 4 months of acting as a commander, my officers decided to promote me and send me to the officers' course. During this 8-month course, I joined a team of 12 soldiers who all came from all kinds of different units, including special units. I was the only girl in my team, which meant that I had a special duty and that I had to prove that I was capable of doing everything the boys were able to do, not only for me, but for all the women in the IDF combat unit. Thank you. This meant that sometimes I had to push myself beyond my limits, but I knew that I had an important mission, and this gave me the drive I needed to excel in the course. After the officer's course, I returned to my unit to serve as a basic training platoon commander, where I commanded 40 freshly enlisted soldiers, as well as the 4 squad commanders. My duties were similar to my previous responsibilities, but involved more responsibility, obligations, and pressure. At this point, I would like to remind you that I didn't grow up in Israel and that I was amongst the only girl in my position at the base. These 2 factors didn't make life easier for me, but I saw them as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. I had to push myself and prove over and over again that I was worth being there. But it felt normal to me. I felt like I was supposed to be there. When my soldiers finished their basic training, we were in charge of safeguarding the Jordan border. This mission required a lot of patience, determination, and willpower. But mostly, my soldiers had to understand the signification and the importance of their mission, because this is the main factor that led them to successfully complete tedious tasks over and over again. Life on the border was not very thrilling, but our presence there was indispensable. The border with Jordan seems like a peaceful border since the peace agreement that was signed in 1994. I guess this is the part when you ask yourself, so where is the threat? Why are you guarding this border? The answers lies with the questions. If we was not there, we had to face hundreds of smugglers, illegal residents, and God knows what else entering our country. We spent months guarding the border, creating a tight bond between the soldiers. Being there with so many different people from all over the country, from all kinds of different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds, made me proud. I was defending the country I choose to serve, and I was introduced to a whole new world. And I knew that this is where I belong. As a young officer that decided to make Aliyah in order to protect the Israeli border, to be here today, to see the support that we get, is something that I will never forget. Thank you. Thank you.
And now I would like to call a second colleague of mine, Lieutenant Libby, who will present to you the challenges in the Gaza Strip area. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Libby. I'm 23 years old, I reside in Tel Aviv, and I'm currently serving in the IDF. I was born in Israel, the middle of 3 girls, to an Israeli mom and a Canadian dad. And when I was 5, I moved with my family to Vancouver, Canada, where my dad is from. When I was 18, I joined a program called Garin Sabar, which is aimed to help Jewish people and Israelis like myself with the process of moving back to Israel in order to join the army. I moved with a group of Americans to CUFI, a kibbutz near the Gaza border, and my home in Israel for the first 3 years. About half a year after I moved, I drafted into the Combat Engineering Corps and became an instructor of explosives and landmines. I proceeded to become an officer, first as a missiles instructions officer, and then as a commander in the officers training school. And now I serve as the operations officer for the combat engineering in the Gaza division. Although I moved to Tel Aviv almost 2 years ago, I now spend more time in the Gaza division in the area than when I actually lived there. I appreciate having dual perspective of the area, both as an IDF officer as well as civilian living there. It makes everything I do much more meaningful and personal. The team I am part of works in 3 major fields: combat engineering, building and constructing, dealing with the various bombs that are placed on the border or flown into Israel with kites and balloons, and finally, the tunnel threat. Serving in the Gaza division has been one of the more meaningful, interesting, and also exhausting experiences of my life. We work tirelessly and in every condition because our mission is so clear: to defend the border. The border is not a pretty sight. We've had protests every week since Passover, often becoming violent. We've had fires destroy our fields, killing animals, burning thousands of acres of land, and ruining the main source of income for many of the kibbutzim. Inside Gaza, the ruling power is the Hamas, which was elected in 2006. There are also groups like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, an aggressive group that works to instigate such terror. They both have militants that work constantly to continue these acts of terror, the burning of fields, of flying over kites and bombs on the border, and placing bombs on the border in order to kill soldiers. I work with the soldiers in charge of dismantling such bombs. They're brave and professional, and they undergo a long training in the military to prepare them. Two of those guys, of my guys, were injured when one of the bombs exploded on them. The brave officer lost his hand in the explosion to prevent anyone else from getting hurt. It can be very frustrating to serve on the Gaza border. I truly believe that the Palestinian people are not the enemy, but inside the Gaza Strip, Hamas takes advantage of their own people, their own civilians, in order to terrorize Israel. They use materials and financial aid that are meant for humanitarian causes instead to buy and build weapons like rockets and mortars and bombs like the one that the officer lost his hand to. They especially use much of the material aid meant for infrastructure to instead build terror tunnels. If you remember, one of the responsibilities that I previously mentioned is taking part of the effort to find and destroy such tunnels. These tunnels are literally being dug under the border with the aim of killing, injuring, and kidnapping civilians and soldiers alike. The act of finding these tunnels is fascinating and incredibly difficult. I've been doing this job for almost a year, and I'm still constantly surprised and amazed by the ingenious inventions and technologies that Israeli minds have come up with to pinpoint the exact location of these tunnels. Like I said, I find it incredibly frustrating that this is what Hamas chooses to waste their time on and their resources on, instead of helping their own people. And since they dig these tunnels, these terror tunnels, we work day and night with the most brilliant and creative people in Israel in order to find and destroy each and every one. We've detected and demolished 12 tunnels in the last 6 months alone. The first operation that I took part of was incredible. It was huge and unique. It was a huge and unique mission, which took a very long time to plan. We successfully destroyed a major tunnel and stopped the terrorists digging it in their tracks. But when we finished and I went home, I found it really difficult to make this mental switch, this huge mental switch, from the mission to just go home to Tel Aviv and take off my uniform and to go have fun with my friends. It felt so strange to go back to the city, the utopian Tel Aviv bubble, and to go to restaurants and just hang out. It felt so strange and emotional, and I was full of thoughts and feelings. And so I called my mom and I cried. And then I put my uniform back on and I went back to work because I understood that no one else will protect our country but us. I've served as the Combat Engineering Operations Officer for a year now. I can wholeheartedly say that I enjoy and I cherish this work because I believe in what I'm doing and I'm proud of our work. What I do, what we all do, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's demanding and it's all-consuming. But then at the end of the day, when I go home and I do take my uniform off, I do my best just to live my life as a regular Israeli and to have fun with my friends and family. And I always know that I work for a cause that is purely to protect and to defend our home. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen.
Last but not least, I would like to invite another colleague of mine, Major Barak, who will present to you our challenges and threats in our northern border.
Good morning, Shalom. My name is Barak Ganot. I am 30 years old. For all of us, our life story usually begins on the date of our birth. I was born in 1988. My life story begins 44 years earlier. At the same moment, my grandmother, Elka Ganot, prisoner number 12750, entered Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. While Dr. Mengele sentenced to life or to death the arriving Jews, he addressed my grandmother with these words: Du bist jung und musst leben und arbeiten. This is German for, you are young and you must live and work. Rechts, go right. 1944 is the year when my dear grandmother, Elka Ganot, God bless her soul, an exceptional and strong woman, was just 23 years old. The oldest child of her family out of 8 brothers and sisters. 1944 is when the Nazis forced them into the ghetto at their village in Hungary. Later, she and her family were transported to Auschwitz by train. They came to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the biggest death factory in world history. It took 3 days and nights of travel in a cattle wagon. No food, no water, stuffed, no fresh air, no toilet. Her family was immediately separated. Jews were forced by Nazis, accompanied by huge, violent, barking dogs. All were shouting, pushing, pulling, and aggressively beating to form 2 lines. The left line, old women, sick-looking women, and children were sent to the gas chambers. The right line was sent to concentration camps. Their fate was hard labor and slavery. My grandmother had left, following her mother and sisters. Dr. Mengele spotted her. He ran after her. He grabbed her by a collar. He forced her to the right line. This was when he shouted at her the few words in German, which I've quoted in the beginning. The only German words I know. The words that were my grandmother's nightmare since that moment and until her last day, and the words which my story begins with. Her family was executed in the gas chambers within less than 45 minutes from arrival, and according to the outstanding, stable, tough, precise efficiency measures and German statistics, they were all dead. Her father Yitzhak died. Her mother Rachel died. Her sisters Elisheva, Michaela, and Hannah died as well. All at that day, within less than 1 hour. Can you imagine her feeling when a couple told her, while in line, "Look there, the dark smoke emitting from the chimney are your dears, your family members. They were just gassed and burned to ashes." Can you imagine her thoughts, her fear? I grew up as a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor. Those are my roots. These roots have changed and affected my life. I am what I am today because of these roots, and I appreciate them. I grew up with the Holocaust stories as a legacy. From my early childhood, I absorbed the necessity of an independent Jewish country with the ability to stand and fight for itself. Thank you. A country which its Jewish citizens will never again be slaughtered as cattle. I am standing here today as a proud combat officer in the Israeli Defense Forces. I grew up in a Zionist family. I absorbed the never-ceasing desire named for peace, tolerance, and hope for a better world. At the age of 18, I joined the army. I served at the artillery corps at a special combat unit called Meitar, which operates a long-range anti-tank missile called the Tammuz. Since then, I'm currently serving in my 12th year of combat service. I have fulfilled a variety of combat roles, starting as a platoon commander and having worked my way up, deputy battalion commander. I took part in 2 operations in Gaza, protected 3 different borders, defended many villages in Judea and Samaria, arrested hundreds of terrorists, and restored peace during countless riots. But in spite of all that I've seen, nothing impacted me more than what I witnessed through my binoculars in the Syrian city Quneitra in late 2011. At the time, I was serving as a company commander, responsible for 100 soldiers on Israel's border with Syria. My mission was to monitor a portion of the Syrian border next to Quneitra Pass. One afternoon, on a relatively normal day, as the sun was shining and the beautiful green fields stood silent, black vehicles belonging to the ruthless Syrian shadow militia entered Quneitra and shattered the peace. One of my young soldiers, just 19, ran to me, confused and shocked. Out of the vehicles had emerged men in dark military garb, and they began grabbing men, women, and children from their homes and executing them on the streets. We could not see what took place as these men of pure evil entered the homes of the innocent people of Quneitra. But we heard the screams of torture, of sexual assault across the border. No person, no matter how battle-hardened, could ever forget the sights and sounds we witnessed that day. And these so-called visits by so-called Syrian soldiers continued once or twice a week for years. This experience cannot be described, and it caused me to recall my grandmother's stories, which I've partly shared with you. By 2013, the entire Syrian medical and civil infrastructure in the area had collapsed. And despite Israel officially being at war with Syria, we knew we had to act. On February 7th of that year, the IDF and the State of Israel opened our border gates to injured Syrian civilians for the first time. I was the company commander that accomplished this unusual and special mission. We provided medical aid to citizens from an enemy country. At the beginning, we were tense. We did not know what to expect. As a company commander, I wondered, are they really injured or just pretending to be and wish to execute a terror attack? But soon it became a daily routine. Injured Syrians kept crossing the border, and Israeli soldiers kept collecting them and treating them in the nearby hospital. Currently, the IDF established the aid activity fully controlled by the Northern IDF Command. I want to share with you some facts and figures. To date, more than 500,000 Syrian citizens killed, 20,000 of them children, more than 13 million displaced, over 11,000 civilians tortured to death, over 4 million refugees. We are helping as many Syrians as we can, but the need is so much greater. We provided medical help to over 4,000 Syrians. We supplied almost 500,000 liters of fuel and more than 55 tons of warm clothes. Now, who is exercising humanity and who is exercising cruelty? Israel is in a rough, unstable, and complicated neighborhood. Let's count a few of the many forceful powers who desire this small part of the world. Iran, Iran's proxy Hezbollah, Iran's soldier in Syria, and Iran's founded terror organization Hamas. Iran is seeking to build permanent military bases in Syria, creating front headquarters for attacking the State of Israel, attempting to build an empire in the Middle East. I hope that my message to you today was loud and clear. We will keep our spirit to protect Israel from its enemies. We will learn the enemy and prepare for future challenges. We are ready. I am ready. I will return to the same border, this time as a battalion commander, to keep the border secured, and to provide help to injured Syrians. We, the IDF, will make the world a better place. We will keep a strong army to protect the state of Israel. We will carry the beacon of light to and for a better world. I will never forget my promise, committed at the age of 22 at the same cursed land called Auschwitz. There, in area A14, I found my grandmother's barrack. When I got back to Israel, I gave her the most precious gift she could ever dreamed of. I gave her a picture as a combat officer in the IDF near the same barrack she was prisoned here. So I'm standing here and promising you and my dearest grandmother, never again. I wish that my grandmother could stand with us here in this room. She would see how much you care about Israel and your warm welcome. And I'm saying, as she would say, Toda Rabba, thank you very much.
Why don't you remain standing, please, for just a moment. I'm going to read, or I should say make a personal declaration of Psalm 27, New King James Version. The words will be on the screens. You can follow along or join in with me if you'd like. The Lord is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me upon a rock. And now shall my head be lifted up above mine enemies round about me. Therefore will I offer in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing, yea, I will sing praises unto the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me and answer me. When thou sayest, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Hide not thy face far from me. Put not thy servant away in anger. Thou hast been my help. Leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of mine enemies. Deliver me not over unto the will of mine enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. You may be seated.
Good morning. I just have just a simple announcement for you. I'm Lynn Hammond, the director of Daughters for Zion, our prayer network. And as you can see this morning, we are definitely an action organization. But I want to say to you this morning, we are a praying organization. And this is where you come in. We pray for, of course, the support of Israel, for the peace of Jerusalem and the continued growth and development of CUFI. We have, at this time, 33,000 prayer groups across America that pray for Israel every single day. And it's amazing, isn't it? But it's not enough. And so from this summit, in my own heart, I desire to see that number take a giant leap from this summit, from now till next year. And that makes your participation so important. So today, if you are not a member of Daughters for Zion or Prayer Network, it's very simple for you to register. Our table is right outside those doors to my right and your left. And you can sign up there, or it's really simple. You can just go on to dfc.org and register there. Thank you so much for your prayers, for your support, and for your love of Israel. And God bless you.
All right, pop quiz. Boker Tov. Boker Or. All right, you all pass. So those of you that have hung out with our CUFI family for long enough know that we often bring special guests. And one of the most special to our heart is Elliot Chadoff, who is a major in the IDF. Elliot, those of you who watch The Watchmen on TBN, Elliot is a very frequent contributor. Those of you who have been to our leadership summits, past summits, Elliot hangs around us. We like to keep good company. I will tell you, after a 5-minute conversation with Elliot, you will have a better understanding of what is transpiring in real time in Israel and the Middle East than if you watch cable news for 24 straight hours. So without further ado, Elliot Chadoff.
Thank you. Make me earn it. And we have limited time. Well, after hearing those officers, I think you can understand how the little state of Israel survives in a sea of unfriendliness. They told you what they see sort of on the ground level, and all of it correct. What I want to do is zoom back a little bit, because sometimes when you see it on the day-to-day basis, up front and personal, and been there and done that, you kind of lose a bit of the perspective. If I were to focus everything they said on one word, that word would be Iran. Not every single thing that happens, but everything that happens is Iran. And I want to tell you a little bit about what that means on the Iran level, on the Israel level, and I'll tell you now what I'm not going to tell you is the when, because nobody knows, but I'll even give you an idea of what that when can mean for us. Iran is on the move. Now, this is no surprise. Anybody who's been following Iran for the past 30 years knows that they're on the move, 40 years. Their plan is not only to control the Middle East, they've said it outright. Their plan is to rebuild the Persian Empire, and if you don't know what that means, open the book of Esther. An empire that lasted for over 1,000 years. They are trying to do it. They're doing it on the ground, they're doing it at sea, they're doing it with ballistic missiles, they're doing it with a nuclear program. None of this is specifically about the Middle East. The Middle East is the first step, because the Middle East is a critical strategic region. Syria provides them with two critical strategic goals. One that should concern you as Americans, and one that concerns all of us vis-a-vis Israel. I'm going to mention the American one just very briefly. They want a bridge, a land bridge, between Iran and their ports on the Mediterranean. They have naval bases on the Mediterranean. The purpose of those naval bases is to allow their fleets to get out into the Atlantic The Atlantic. They have stated, although your media doesn't report it, don't get me started, that their intention is for their Navy to patrol the Caribbean. Yes, the Caribbean, not the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. You can figure out what that means. And if you can't figure out what that means, add ballistic missiles programs that can reach the United States of America carrying a nuclear weapon, and a nuclear weapons program to put that nuclear warhead on those ballistic missiles. Add to that a celebration every November in Iran called Death to America Day. If you're still having trouble connecting the dots, see me after class. The more immediate thing that they're trying to do is establish a direct military front on our eastern northern border, in other words, the Golan in Syria. They already have a northern front in Lebanon with Hezbollah. The Syrian war, something they've been participating in from the beginning. They're backing the regime. Hezbollah is in there. They've been recruiting locals as well. There are Shiite and other Iranian-backed militias in Syria, not at the quality of Hezbollah, but fighters. And they are desperately trying to get close to the border. And they've been doing this for quite a while. Over the past year in particular, we have been trying to signal to them that we don't appreciate the effort. Now, when we signal under these terms, it's usually done by the Air Force. And signaling means striking targets, not so much to cause them strategic damage, as much as to say, we're watching. We don't want you there. They haven't been getting the message. In January, they launched the first direct military attack against Israel from Iran, not by proxy, not by agent, but direct, by launching a drone against Israel across the border. It was shot down. The initial reports were that it was a reconnaissance drone. After investigation, it was found to be loaded with munitions. In other words, the purpose was to actually strike an Israeli city. Now, a failed attack is still an attack. And we responded to it with airstrikes. We took out the base that that drone was launched from. You probably heard about that attack because that was on the way back. We call it the Equipment Renewal Program. On the way back, one of the F-16s was hit and was shot down. And here I'll tell you, you hear about spectacular successes, you hear about spectacular failures, and the shooting down of a plane is a spectacular failure. It's not catastrophic. The two guys ejected over Israel, they're safe, but losing an aircraft is still losing an aircraft. You hear about that. What you don't hear is that we're doing that virtually every week, 3 or 4 nights a week. In other words, this is happening. This war is on. Along the way, we sent a Mossad team into Tehran and relieved them of some 100,000 not very well guarded documents. I don't know if you've heard the rumor that Iran is planning on moving its embassy to Jerusalem because all the documents are there already. But it was very embarrassing, of course. And they decided to strike directly again. They tried to launch rockets at us. The first night, we took out the rocket launcher. The second night, they fired a little more hastily, and they actually launched 32 rockets. Don't be too impressed. The launcher has 32 tubes. So they pressed the button once. 28 missed the country, and 4 were intercepted by the Iron Dome. Oh for 32 is kind of, for me, reminiscent of growing up in New York in the 60s watching the Mets. Sorry. That was history, come on. Those are the years we unfurl the banners on opening day, wait till next year, right? But it's going on. That night, we took out 75 quality targets, Iranian targets in Syria. That's the history lesson. Brief, recent history. But in the aftermath of that, now let's get to a bit of analysis. Iran is suffering a major setback at the moment on a number of fronts. First and foremost, in the aftermath of those documents, not prodded by, but certainly helped by those documents, the United States withdrew from that horrendous deal that they weren't following anyway. Sanctions are in place and moving into place, not only against Iran, but against companies that do business with Iran, and that means that European companies are stopping doing business with Iran. Funny thing happens when America starts to lead. And to quote Alan West, leading from behind is following. I love it. Significantly, Russia has moved away from Iran. Part of that is Israeli diplomacy, and you know that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been to Moscow a few times. A high-level Russian delegation, still living in the Cold War, is coming to Israel this week to meet with our leaders. It's all about coordination. We don't have common goals, but we don't have conflicting goals in Syria. So we're splitting the difference. That's hurting Iran. The Russians, because of our strikes, have moved their people out of the Iranian bases. The Syrians have told the Iranians, we don't want you in our bases. They're not stupid. In those airstrikes, we took out surface-to-air missile systems, some of them supplied by Russia, others produced by Iran. If you're not up on strategy, let me help you out. If my planes take out your anti-aircraft, not so good. The Russians have rethought supplying Iran with anti-aircraft missiles because it's kind of embarrassing. So they're under pressure. They have two players in the region that they can use. One is Hezbollah in the north. Hezbollah is not a terrorist organization anymore, it's a terrorist army. It is organized as an army, it's trained as an army, it's equipped as an army. It is a serious threat to Israel's northern border. Hezbollah is not a proxy of Iran, it's an agent of Iran. A proxy does something that you benefit from, an agent does what you tell them to do. Hezbollah gets its orders directly from Iran, from the Revolutionary Guards. I predict, and I don't do many predictions, I predict that Hezbollah will not be wasted by Iran. In other words, we're not going to see them throwing Hezbollah away because we know and we know that they know that we know that they know that in the next round, Hezbollah is going to have a religious experience. We, on the political and the military level, publicly, have stopped using words like changing their consciousness. We're speaking in terms of defeat, destruction, elimination. It isn't going to be easy, it's going to be a very, very nasty experience. The only player they have at the moment is Hamas, and what we've seen over the past few months, escalating up through this past week, is in large part, not entirely, but in large part, Iran pushing the only organization that it has on the ground that it doesn't care about in order to attack Israel. Because here, let me tell you, the Iranians will fight happily to the last drop of Palestinian blood. And that mess around Gaza, constantly escalating, if you're asking yourselves, why are they doing it? It escalates, they get their heads kicked in, a week later they come back and they do it again. Are they stupid? No, they're not stupid. Their main supplier of funds, of equipment, of training is Iran, and Iran is prodding them forward, and they don't really have much choice. Now, I don't really care, but they don't have much choice. They're being pushed by Iran. Let me conclude with this. When? And the answer is we don't know. The Iranians are under pressure that can decelerate or it can accelerate. In other words, they can take the patient approach and say, you know what? Things aren't so good right now. They'll get better in 5, they'll get better in 8, they'll get better in 10 years. We've waited this long. What's another decade between friends and enemies? The alternative scenario is what's known in the literature, strategic and otherwise, as a closing window of opportunity. Things are bad today, they were better yesterday, they're going to get worse tomorrow. Why? We can't wait. I'll tell you that militating in that direction is the age of the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, the Ayatollah. He may not have 10 years to wait, and he knows that. And that militates in that direction. But we don't know. What I can say is that on top of all of that is the perpetual threat of what I refer to generically as the nursery school scenario, and we've had some close calls on that recently. And that is something hits the nursery school, or it can be a playground, it could be a hospital, it doesn't matter. We've had some of those incendiary devices carried by balloons and kites drop into the play areas of nursery schools and kindergartens while the kids were there playing. Nobody, fortunately, thank God, nobody was killed or injured. But you know, the difference between it falling here and here is the difference between nothing happened and war. Because you can be sure that if 10 or 15 or 20 kindergarten kids are killed, that's war. There's not a lot of decision making in that. So that's the chaos we live in today. Fortunately, we've got a bunch of motivated, trained, organized, committed young people like the types we just heard. And I have to add, because I'd be remiss not to, also a bunch of old people like myself who are willing to do it as well. And certainly, last but not least, people like yourselves who are standing with us and backing us. So thank you. Thanks for being here. God bless you.